Well, this peculiar piece has been my side project for the last few months, and I wrote it for the sole pleasure of creation, without deadlines, answerable to nothing beyond the story itself. I suppose one might call it a Celtic saga, or perhaps a Celtic ballad, for it carries both the sweep of myth and the sorrow of an old song remembered by the fire. It is the story of Neit and Etain, a god of war and a healer, and of a love that sparks quickly, fierce and bright, only to be extinguished by death almost as soon as it begins. Yet death never truly ends such things, does it? At least, not in myth, where memory lives longer than flesh, and where love may outlast the grave, returning in echo, in oath, and in the hearts of those who come after. I do not want to spoil the tale for you, so I will leave its road untold. Listen instead, and perhaps share what you think of a love that travels through generations and refuses to yield, even when war, grief, and time itself try to silence it.
The Song of Neit by Martin Smallridge, Healer Price. Within the blackthorn hall I tuned my lyre. Above the salt-wet door the peat smoke curled. A dusk-born god sat brooding by the fire. His oath lay furled like raiment from the world. Neit held my sight, a hawk beneath the beam, while Bauv sang low, and Nemain craved the more. Where oak met bronze he rose in candle glare. The raftered house kept breath like stalled kine bound. His spear shaft rang a lean and wolfish prayer. A king's cup shook against the timbered ground. Bright through his smile there worked a hidden gin. Then laughter leapt through smoke-cured boards within. A river maid came in with swaddled hands. Her braid bore rushes from the fording place. She poured the ale as one pours yielded lands. Calm ruled her eyes, and quarrel loosed its pace. Neit watched her wrists, and warfare learned delay. Then love rose sharp, a spear that sought no stay. Above, full near, did Bauv wheel in a cloak. Athwart the thought came Nemain like a blade. They weighed her heart as monks weigh burdened yoke. They read her breath as hounds read wind and shade. Deep Changal Undyne woke within her gaze, and mercy stirred through all his war-worn ways. Healer, an iron charged the speaking tone, the cup thou bearest gives truce unto the slain. Thy fingers bind what battle strips to bone, yet battle calls, and blood returns again. Thy mouth keeps dawn, while I keep midnight's chair. So speak thy price, and set it in the air. My price abides in living skin and seam. Through stitch and herb, a cloth may close the wound. By hearths boys wait whose sires are held in din. For wives, a kiss when grief has pressed them down. Though war gives crows their feast, love finds a way. Now lay thy spear apart, and breathe this day. He laughed as when a shield receives hard rain. The sound woke scar upon the hidden ear. Then he touched her cheek, and fire ran through his vein. Sweetness took salt, and joy drew close to fear. He felt her pulse, and battle learned refrain, while dusk grew thick, and every star came near. I followed out where thorn and metal spread. Below, the camp lay broad along the lee. A torch flame reeled, and through its wavering red, her face a vow, his own a mystery. He bent to kiss, as hawks descend in speed, and night received their mouths like tidal reed. Thy eyes hold slaughter in their darkened tide. Within thy hands lies quietness and art. Deep in the earth a god puts down his pride, yet in the maid there beats the braver heart. Close Bauv stood watch, and hungered for the toll, while Nemain drove the nail into his soul. Envoy Hook. On council stones the captains weighed the horde. Near hazel rods men scored the waiting earth. The druid spoke of envoys by the ford, where stranger gifts seek passage into birth. Lu's steady gaze held law, and Nuada dread, yet Neit chose patience while the anger spread. Haste, 3 cloaked men came bearing wine and gold. Their tongues ran smooth as eels beneath a weir. Before cold breasts they offered seats of power, then proffered peace that smelt of funeral beer. Neit heard each word and marked the buried hook. With one hard look, he cast their honey back. One envoy reached for Étain's braided hair. His smile put lust where honor should have stood. Neit set his point an inch from that despair, then froze the hand that sought her face for food. The envoy blinked and tasted sudden awe, then left with vows gone bitter in the jaw. Night Snatch. Chat night a whistle slipped through furs and gorse. A shadow moved where ditches hemmed the camp. My barred blood stirred, my heart gave out its curse. A hound lay flat beside the failing lamp. Connell gripped hard my arm, his brow a knot, then ran where steel struck sparks in trampled plot. Rough hands now seized her, rope across her wrist. Under borrowed blue, a traitor led her through. Corrupt, his mouth gave honor one dark twist. Greed filled his eyes, his hands ruled Fomor crew. Swift Neit moved, Danta as night on winter streams, then drove his spear through throat and treacherous schemes. With gentler steel he cut away her bands. Like some grave monk he read her bruises plain. Hard came her breath, yet courage filled her hands. Within her palms lived heat despite the pain. Behind, the traitor left his quarrel there, and homeward Neit bore her as one bears prayer. At dawn the council took a sterner line. Lu spoke of worms that eat the trusted loaf. A lord had sold his kin for foreign wine, then fled to Bress and crossed beyond the cove. Nuada swore the brine would choke his tongue, while Neit swore blood would see the oath full sung. Étain stood quiet, bandage on her arm. Her gaze stayed fixed like stones that mark the grave. Still flecked with war, his hands bore battle's harm. Then she kissed his palm as one who crowns the brave. Bauv cried above, a dark hunger-swept wing, while Nemain breathed, and ranks grew fierce in spring. Heather March. The host moved out across the heathered rise. Behind, the carts creaked like old men in bed. Bog reek clung close, and curlew cries would rise. Through spear talk and through promises of dead, Neit strode before, beneath a god's hard gaze, and Étain walked where linen met war's blaze. On Mag Turret the banners met the light. Broad lay the field, like judgment in a book. The Fomor drums beat thick as hammered night. Their spears stood up like pikes in a chill brook. Lu's face wore calm, his fingers held their might, while Neit held chaos like a fisher's hook. By candle glow he came where Étain stood. Steam rose from kettles, needles shone like ice. His brow pressed close to hers in brothered breath. Plain stood the vow, yet marked with sacred price. Through Glio and Vosh my breath runs graveward now. From graves my hands draw souls and hold them fast. She thrust a bronze ring firmly in his palm, or else he pressed it deep into her hand. Their fingers locked, and tenderness grew solemn, a holy ache that quickened through the land. He kissed her mouth with hunger schooled by calm, then left with dawn laid broad on either hand. Then horns cried out, and shield wall took its frame, a river made of bronze and hide and men. The first clash struck as smiths strike heated iron. That ringing traveled valley, hill, and fen. Ba tore the air with carrion-nourished cry, while Nemain poured her frenzy from the sky. Neit drove straight on where Baelor's guard stood fast. Through flesh and splintered yew his spear made lanes. Like herons threading grass, he stepped through screams. Hard flashed his grin. His eyes proved bitter true. One helm he broke, then shattered one more there. Behind him lay a field of ruined prayer. The traitor came in Tua cloak stitched with lies. He called false turns, he flung young lads to doom. Neit saw the ruse and heard the boy's thin cries, then pierced that treason through its woven gloom. The traitor fell, his mouth gave out one sigh, and blood wrote judgment where the feet ran by. Yet love held peril in a single cry. Étain ran forward, calling out his name. Her voice cut through the iron-shaken sky, a silver thread that drew his gaze like flame. A hooked blade found his side beside the wall of shields, and red poured down at that one call. To guard her, he turned through the crushing press. Hard came his breath, his ribs held broken song. The warriors dragged her back through grief's duress. Cloth tore beneath her nails, fierce stayed her cry. Facing the guard, Neit chose a deeper grace. There drove his wounded frame through slaughter's space. He cracked their ring as oxen break a gate. His spear stump stabbed, his forearm took the steel. Through pain he strode, and paid the ancient rate, a god's own coin in bruised and burning zeal. He opened seam for Lu to meet his hour, and every footfall rang with hammered power. Baylor's dread eye flared wide like sudden sun. Death crossed the ranks in one devouring beam. Lu's cast flew straight and struck the giant one. The monster's roar went rending through the seam. The field convulsed, the Fomor line fell done. Yet Neit took stone and spear and sank in dream. Kneeling, then rising, faltering, yet he stayed, one heartbeat longer than the mortal span. Across the bodies laid, he sought Etain, then found her eyes, two lamps that grief had won. Up rose one hand, a blessing rough as spade. At last it fell, and loosed the world to dawn. Etain reached him, her palms against his breast. Her linen darkened, herbs sank in the mire. She pressed and prayed and fought for every breath. Her mouth shaped love as though it shaped a choir. Neit breathed one line and gave her name its crest, then slipped like smoke from some spent household fire. Above did Ba keen darkly as a queen. Onward screamed Nemain, though sorrow edged the cry. The Tua drove through, their victory cut keen. A blade that cut, a cup that carried sigh. The field held hush where living walked between, and crows came down beneath a gentler sky. They raised a cairn where broken spears lay thick. Each stone held sweat, each stone hid salt. Etain laid down the ring where winds ran quick, then pressed her brow thereon, grief built and taut. I struck one chord, my fingers cold and sick, and felt her love stand taller than his fall. Bronze vow. Again from war she walked to River Bend. A hut of wattle answered to her hand. Through torn flesh she stitched, through fever healed her friend. From edges of her land she drove the wolves. Near leaned her spear, her mercy reached its end. In song lived Neit across the listening land. On feast nights candles shone in byre and barn. By old men's mouths Mag Turid filled the field. Beside the yarn she poured one cup for him, by river sound where grief became her shield. His name she sang as mothers sing a warn. Close sealed she held his honor bright within. I came once more with ash upon my coat. My beard had grayed like lichen on a stone. She greeted me and set out bread and oat. Her eyes held depth where sterner wisdom shone. I asked how any heart lives past the throat. She touched the ring, then smiled and sat alone. Hatred glows hot as nettle in the skin. Through love comes law. From law the hand finds aim. With spear she walks, the healer, by the ring. Within her name the widow bears a god. Ansheon's spell moved in measure through her breath. His shadow warmed my bones and drew from death. So then the tale went walking on its feet, through bog and ridge, through chapel, fort, and fair. Men spoke of Neit where barley met the wheat, where forge fire burned, where children combed their hair. His war stayed raw, yet love made iron sweet, and honor held its line through grief and prayer. I bore him on through tavern, court, and road, my harpwood scarred, my fingers split and sore. Each time I sang, his shadow shared the load. Each hush I nursed drew ravens asking more. A battle god had served a lover's code, and Eitan held the key beside her door. So hear the end when winter lamps burn late. Warm grows the milk while turf gives out its breath. Love found a war god, reshaping then his fate. In sorrow-minted death, a healer paid her debt. Betrayal bit, yet honor guarded gate, and song bore both, then carried both in breath. His name rides on where curlew follows plough. By salmon turns, the hills keep ancient ore. Though spear may fall, an oath abides in bough. Even a bleeding kiss leaves heart brave sure. Still Baive feeds hunger, Nemen binds her vow. For evermore, Eitan holds fast his ring. Lammas summons. While by the river Eitan kept her ground, and sorrow held the summer in its sway, Lammas returned with hoofbeats' urgent sound. Foam flecked the mare that labored through the day. Under his cloak a Fomor token frowned. Thus came the writ that called Eitan to pay. Salt reeked from parchment, kelp, and bitter tar. Across its skin fair promises were spread. Courteous the phrases shone beneath that star. Within each curve lay tribute, hunger, dread. Bress named her ring as bait for coming war. Beneath the silk old treachery lifted head. Near to the benches sat a young lord sleek. Mint stained his fingers, softness veiled his guile. Smooth ran his plea, with order on its cheek. Behind that poise there twitched a colder smile. Eitan heard greed move darkly through his word, and through the hall the cold suspicion stirred. Up from her place she rose in homespun gray. Beside her hand the patient spear stood near. Grave fell her voice, and daylight edged her say. A peace that sells the heart leaves only fear. Bread keeps a people, tribute strips the land, while coward kings will build upon the sand. Later that night the Lord received a guest. Sea salt clung close about the stranger's glove. Low ran their trade of pathways, gates, and rest. Between their words moved prophet dressed as love. Stone settled hard where honor once had pressed. Fever then drove him where the faithless rove. Wakeful she lay, while reeds along the byre whispered of oaths gone sour beside the fence. Through plank and latch there passed a spear-bright fire, Neit's shadow stirring war from memory's sense. Measured her tread that crossed the moon-washed mire. Black stood the gate, half open to a fence.
Marsh Pursuit. Through gorse he tracked the prince where rabbits crouched. Above the fern the moon hung thin and keen. Down by the marsh a wavering torch head slouched. From salted kern there rose a prayer unclean. There moved the young lord, rigid in his pride. Once more his hand let silver choose its side. Seaward the envoy drew him to a cleft, concealed among the stones where salt winds cross. By that dark slit a waiting skiff was left, ready with oars and thole-pins laid across. Out stepped Eitan, her lifted spear held true. Hard fell her voice, and night received its due. From thy mother came the cloak upon thy back. In thy father's jaw there lived an honored grave. Now does thy treason turn the pathway black, and sell the kin thy father fought to save. Shaken, the young lord dragged a ragged breath. Moist grew his eyes as awe outstared his death. Laughing, the envoy bared a bone-pale blade. Light ran along his wrist, a fisher's art. Sudden he drove for Eitan through the shade. Swiftly he cast for silence at her heart. Arduabar burned within his brine-hard grin, till straight her spear broke through and pinned his sin. Backward the young lord fell against the stone. Numb reached his hands as though for priestly thread. He spoke his fear in broken, hollow tone. Empty my gut cried out for board and bread. Steady Eitan held fast to all his fear, measured her word and made his penance clear. Here does thy life abide, with land and kin. By thy own tongue shall hidden names be brought.
Like secret iron thy penance enters flesh. Through open deeds must trust again be wrought. Lo, he bent down and kissed her spear-like grace. Grieved he rose up and followed from that place. Daybreak then brought him to the council seat. Ash-faced the elders listened, still as stone. Calmly she gave his tale its measured heat, afterward named the blood, and midnight done. Hushed stood the hall, a chapel after bread. Then justice rose and struck the guilty dead. Penance turning. The young lord gave his cattle to the poor. Now roads he mended, built a bridge of larch. There with the widows by the chapel door, beneath the lintel learned he every name. Humbled, his pride grew steadier than ore, clearer his breath, like one long schooled in march. Yet Brez sent stirring tides along the sound. His warcraft moved like mold within the meal. Westward a raid struck. Fishing roofs were drowned. Near a broken wheel one priest in blood lay still. Etan heard tidings, felt her heart grow wound. Around the spear her hand drew cold and full. At dusk she walked to cairn with rowan sprig. Quiet the stones stood, a choir of patient wait. Upon the lichen laid she either palm. Sternly she spoke Neit's name, both grave and straight. Seath seemed far off, beyond the surf and reeds. Law yet stood waiting at the opened gate. Then Ba came near, with eyes of polished jet. Feather dark her mantle brushed the cairn's grey side. Hard grows thy heart, thy voice runs hot and wet. Keen as the turning tide, thy grief holds power. Nearer came Nemain, breath like spear point set. Upon Etan's brow she pressed where burnings hide. A bargain waits between thy blood and ships. With one cry thou canst turn those men to clay. From thy keen mouth may sail and banner split. Still payment falls and takes its due away. Down went the words like millstone through eclipse. Hidden the marrow shuddered in the clay. Etan felt hatred rise, a blackthorn root. Around her wounded joy she felt it wind. Before her swam the drowned, the nets, the boot, and every sorrow that the sea had thinned. She held the anger like a burning coal, then chose its use and gave it from her soul. Take then my voice and set it at the brink. Leave me my hands for healing in the byre. Out of my mouth shall rise a world gone black. Still shall my palm soothe fever's hidden fire. Ba bowed her head, near Nemain drew like ink. Metal awoke, and oath ran live in wire.
Keening shore. The ships came in upon an iron taste. Their prows cut foam, their oars beat harsh in time. Far off stood Brez beneath a cairn-like helm. His gaze ran cold, his mouth spoke legal rhyme. He raised a horn and promised rule through waste. Upraised, his flag proclaimed his hunger prime. Etain walked out where sand met broken stone. Her cloak snapped hard, her spear stayed low and ready. Behind her stood the young lord, pale as bone. His eyes showed duty, and his hands held bread. Village men bore forks and battered blades. Thick ran their fear, yet Etain's pace stayed steady. Above them Bauv wheeled, crying through the brine. Such sound made all the Fomor's shoulders start. Through all their ranks ran Nemain like dark wine. Wild surged her frenzy, splitting man from heart. Armhawk stirred hot within the salted wind. Then Etain loosed her keening into art. Her wail rose high, a bell struck at the wake. Into their ribs it went and turned blood snow. The raiders faltered, hands began to shake. Out on the tide their oars forgot the stroke. Brez heard that cry, his jaw began to quake. Thin grew his law like tow at ebbing flow. He shouted wrath and drove his champions forth, great men in scale mail, axes broad as doors. Roaring, they ran for Etain from the north. Under their boots the sand flew mixed with salt. Village lads drew close to meet that worth,
yet Etain strode ahead to claim the war. She thrust her spear and took the foremost chest. Across the haft she turned a falling axe. Fierce nursed her cry, unspent and unappeased. Razor bright flashed her voice through holy mist. Down fell the champion, out went breath distressed. Backward the second turned, his courage missed. Then Brez himself strode near in cloak of blue. Wolf-like his smile wore law upon its hide. Powers ride thy voice that sharpen men to blood. Wide grows thy grief, thy love now walks as blade. Fast Etain held his gaze, severe and true. At hatred's side her honor gathered hard. A king earns name through keeping people fed. By lifting poor men's grain he earns their praise. Thy crown consumes the hearts of living folk. Saltborn, thy rule leaves children to bleak days. She hurled her spear and split the banner thread. Back then drew Brez, his face gone tight with strain. The young lord leapt and struck a raider's arm. Across his cheek there ran a sudden cut. For hearth he fought, for mercy, for the farm. Blade after blade he paid his penance through. Etain beheld him and received a calm, as though Neit's hand had touched her fevered brow.
Final breath. The raid broke wide. The ships turned back to sea. Their oars bit foam, their banners sagged and tore. Bow screamed delight, while the main took the wing and ran behind them like a shore-bred wolf. Etain stood fixed, her throat a burning tree. Spent was her breath, her voice had reached its end. Down sank her knees, the sand received her fall. Out reached her hands, while strength left wrist and bone. Village folk closed and made of flesh a wall. Gently they raised her, bore her through the dusk. Open her mouth remained, as though for song. Silent the place where chant had learned to flow. Homeward they brought her. Byre dusk kept its scent. Nearby the kettle cooled, the herbs lay dry. Bright stayed her eyes, though all her frame bent low. Shallow her breath ran, like a dying fish. Softly she touched the young lord's weathered hand. Last came her smile, a candle's dwindling wish. At midnight rose she barefoot through the yard. Pale hung the moon above the river's crease. Slowly she sought the cairn with measured gait. Within her chest the heart beat out release. Hushed sat the crows, each wing a patient guard. Even the air desired for her its peace. There by the stones, where lichens clung like lace, warm held the earth where elder blood sank deep. Soft moved her lips, her eyes sought one dear face. Daily she bore through every wound of grief. Neit was the name she gave with steadfast grace. Near drew his shade where love had laid her down. Then Bow came near with gentler, quieter eye. Close Nemain bent, her whisper turned to him. Sisters they seemed beside death's narrow bed. Dusk held Etain as light holds candle rim. The Tuama cray broke softly through the air. Faint grew her breath, then finer yet, then dim. One final sound she gave, half laugh, half prayer. Within that note lay hatred joined with grace. Curled were her fingers, as though they found his hair. Calm grew her face beyond the claims of flesh. Up rose the crows and traced the widening air. Down then they came, and left the cairn in peace. At dawn the river bore the bronze ashore. Bright lay the ring among the pebbled gleam. There in the reeds it slept forevermore, slipped from the world into a quiet dream. Wrapped in the roots where water meets the bank, near the cold cairn it rested by the stream. So Neit lived on where love and honor join. There grief grew law, and mercy found an edge. Through one healer's cry the tyrant ships turned spoil. By one widow's spear stood faith beside the hedge. Feasting, Bow stood watch, and Nemain drove her storm. Still Etain held the human-rooted pledge. Old grew I then, like hawthorn scarred by years. Weathered my harp, my fingers learned new ache. Long walked I fairs and saved their story whole. One song for hearth, another sung at wake. Quiet the cairn remained, yet held live fire. Brave hearts still felt Neit stirring in their blood. Child Oath. A year slipped by. The cairn earned hoar renown. The river wore bright beads of amber spray. A child found bronze where water lapped the down, then hid it close as misers hoard their pay. He swore by saints and stones of that old town,
then laughed and ran and called it summer's play. Melona washed the copper ring in wine. Upon a thorn bough she set it, grave and still. Of Neit she spoke as though he drank in shrine. For Attain she spoke with a healer's will. Warm grew the bronze, as warm as altar sign. Thus made the hearth seem broader than the hill. That night a hare came limping from the briar. A splintered shaft still quivered in its side. Melona drew it forth with little wire, then bound it firm in linen clean and dried. The creature crouched, as though it knew old fire, then sprang away and left a blood-bright stride. A grey old monk came by with yew-wood staff. His tonsure shone, his eyes held storm-lit mirth. He begged a sup, a crust from Attain's hearth. He named the ring a token full of worth. Ochone, he kissed the bronze with reverent mouth, then warned of Brez astir in western earth. Kings rise again through hunger's baited snare. They buy a tongue, they bribe a drowsing guard. The poor man's bowl grows light beside the gate. The judge grows gross, the covenant grows scarred. Keep watch upon thy buyer, thy blood, thy fate. For crows grow wise, and men grow close and hard. Flannan the child heard all, then tucked the bronze. Within his palm it throbbed like some near drum. In sleep he saw long spears like barley stalks. Above him bough moved dark through circling air. At dawn he ran straight out to cairn and stones, then swore his blood would hold that old line dear.
Fair tempter. At harvest fair the pipers loosed their strain. The ale ran thick, the pork crisped on the spit. A stranger danced with spurs that rang like chain. His smile ran sweet, his eyes flashed hard as flint. He praised the boy, he praised the ring again, then asked what road ran seaward through the grit. Mute stood Flannan, his mother's hand turned cold. Sea green she saw set deep beneath his thumb. From cloak there came the sense of tar and mold. Court curved his speech, yet harshness hummed beneath. Of trade he spoke, of shelter bought with gold. Through every rounded sum moved Fioc's will. Goodwife, thy hearth burns passing bright tonight. Thy son bears luck, thy fields stand rich with seed. Give me that ring, and sleep in safer dark. For kings repay a kindly, prudent deed. Melona rose, her face wore chapel light. Her answer split the sweetness of his plea. My hearth burns true through sweat and salted bread. My son bears luck through mercy, law, and hand. That ring bears names of lovers long in earth. It stands for oaths no sea king understands. The stranger laughed, his teeth flashed bright and red, then slipped his knife and made his meaning plain. Flannan sprang forth, the bronze flared hot as coal. He swung an ash rod, struck the knifeman's wrist. The blade flew out and skittered near a hole, where rooting pigs drove snouts through drifted mist. The stranger cursed and spat against his soul, then fled the fair as though pursued by writ. Bai wheeled above the booths, her cry a bell. Through all the crowd went Nemain like a sting. A tinker crossed himself and muttered spell. A brewer hid his cask beneath the thing. Melona held her son and wept full well, for war's old hunger came again on wing. Barred threshold. They barred the door with oak and iron pin. Bright salt lay strewn along the threshold's rim. The boy stood watch, his eyes grew hawk-keen thin. His breath moved slow, like some low psalter hymn. The ring lay warm against his tender skin, as though a buried sun had stirred in him. At midnight, 3 black geese came down the lane. Their feet made sound like beads on chapel chain. They circled thrice, then vanished into rain, though stars burned clear above the darkened plain. Flannan felt dread run nettled through his vein, yet held his ground, jaw clenched against that sign. A voice then knocked, as soft as beggar's plea. Half lilt, half lost, there rose a woman's moan. Goodwife, lend fire and some swift charity. My child lies sick beside the ditching stone. Out reached Melona. Flannan stayed her hand, then silent pointed at the hanging cross. He spoke one line that Attain once had shaped. A guest bears face,
his shadow bears its fee. The door stays fast, till truth stands plain as oak, till honest hands lie bare for open eye. The Lokran Nema watched above the yard, while laughter slid away through elder tree. At dawn they found 3 footprints burned in clay. Each print held fish scales pressed like wicked coin. The monk returned, his staff now charred and gray. He read the marks and tightened mouth and groin. Brez sends his fetches day by day for this. He wants the ring. Through it old wars may join. Then take it far beyond the blackened bog, past chapel yard, past mountain's iron seam. The monk gave blessing to the waking dog, then laid the charge like fire within a dream. Bear it to Tara through the heather fog, and keep thy heart as clear as running stream.
Psalm Road.
They set forth westward, oats in pack and sack. The monk strode first, the boy stayed close behind. A fox ran near them, pacing on their track. Its tail bore burrs, its gaze seemed grave and kind. The ring lay hidden in a leather wrap, yet sang beneath the boy's enclosed right hand. They crossed a ford where stones ran slick with slime. A salmon broke the skin of water bright. The monk spoke Latin, keeping steady time. He named old martyrs, summoned saintly might. Flannan spoke Gaelic, rough with winter rhyme, and felt the river answer in the light. At dusk a bandit leapt from hazel brake. Up rose his cudgel, sour with mead his breath. There saw he monk, and thought to pluck and take. Then saw the boy, and named him Easy Deed. Fast stood Flannan, the bronze began to wake. Through him went heat like some bridled steed. A shadow crossed the bandit's lifted arm, a presence thick as turf smoke in a byre. The cudgel dropped, the man went pale with harm. His knees struck earth, his eyes grew wide as fire. He babbled prayers, then fled from nameless charm, as though he saw Neit's face in ember spire. The monk grew still, he marked the boy's fixed stare. War walks with thee, yet keep it bridled well. War walks in all, yet mercy holds the edge. The word hung there like iron in a bell. Then Aestir drew them onward through the dusk, and blessing settled softly on the road. They reached a hill where standing stones lay strewn. Down sat the fox and watched them as they slept. Beneath a thinning moon a curlew cried. The boy held bronze, and in his dreaming wept. Soon by a cairn he saw fair Attain stand. Her keening entered deep and gripped his heart. Tara Relic. At Tara's edge the guards bore ashwood spears. Their cloaks were red, their eyes held measured chill. The monk bowed low and spoke with cleric grace. He named the ring, he named the lover's will. The guards drew back, as men draw back from biers, and led them in where candlelight burned still. Beneath the carved oak stood the high seat there. A judge sat grave, one hand upon his rod. He listened long, as one who weighs a dream. He judged the boy, the monk, then bowed to God. At last he took the ring and watched it gleam, then swore it served as law beneath his rod. He laid it in a coffer wrought of wood, hard with wax and churchman's sign he sealed. Then carrot settled on the chamber like grave dust. Each eye was fixed upon that spoken line. So long as this lies sealed in honest ward, thus shall tyrant tongues wither on the vine. Low flew Bob above that courtly hour. Through all the hall strode Nemain like a fever. With half-kind power they marked the listening boy. In him they lit the summons of the spear. One flower held peace and battle in its heart. He bore both seeds within a single year. The monk grew ill, his breath thinned like a thread. He clasped the boy and looked with salt-rough grace. Keep song with law when I lie down in earth. Keep mercy stout, keep courage in thy face. Flannan kissed that brow and bowed the hoary head, then walked out slow where future's harp was strung. Once I saw him full-grown by cairn and stream. Upon his brow no crown, yet awe made room. With healing hands he kept a soldier's dream. In calm he judged, yet loved the battle's law. Within his eyes I read that elder theme, how love keeps war, and war keeps love in awe.